When the desk com chimed, Ganya set her juice down and waited for Miver to stay seated. "Just sit tight, Miv. I want you to pay attention to this." Miver arched a questioning eyebrow, but Ganya shook her head as she reached for the com. "Yes, Pelly?" "Head Administrator, Professor Duvari is here for her appointment. Shall I have her wait?" "Thank you, Pelly. Please send her in. I want her to meet more of the faculty." She gave her most welcoming smile as Lamana Duvari entered the room, noticed Miver in the other chair and hesitated. "Professor, please come in. I'm so sorry to pull you away while you're settling in, but Professor Edrelthi tells me you're doing just fine. Anyway, I wanted you to meet Professor Pelavon while she was here, and this won't take very long." Ganya appraised the interior agent as she glanced over at Miver, smiled like a summer's day, and practically bounced over to bump fists. While Ganya was certain there was a good reason to place Duvari undercover on campus, she'd taken it as an article of faith that she'd only been told enough to be of use. That was all right as far as it went. It wasn't the first time the academy hosted children of sufficiently high birth for the interior to make itself present. But the school was Ganya's Imperium, and she had no intention of simply allowing the agent free rein. "How can I be of service, Head Administrator?" Duvari asked brightly as she entered the office. Clapping her hands together with satisfaction, Ganya waved Duvari to the chair beside Miv and settled into her own. Duvari's face was a picture of innocence and expectation, and she wondered if the interior gave classes in deception and guile, or if Duvari was just naturally gifted. "Now that you're settled in, I need to discuss an additional duty. I really am sorry to just be getting with you now, but there was Professor Kelsick's sudden retirement, then preterm to deal with. It's not a pressing matter just yet, but I didn't want to let any more time go by." Ganya was certain she wouldn't have caught the hint of annoyance if she hadn't been watching. "I'm not sure I understand, Head Administrator. I already have other duties. I have classes in orchestra and choir, office hours, and I've signed up to help the diving team." "Yes, and I do appreciate you stepping forward, but it's about the student show for the first birthday break. Professor Kelsick dealt with it every year before retiring. As the most junior professor in the music department, it's traditionally something that falls to you." As the woman's mouth opened and closed a few times, Ganya settled back and enjoyed the show. It's good to be the head administrator. "But my other duties?" Lamana's voice was uncertain, but there was an undertone of hesitancy that Ganya knew she could treasure. "Oh, yes, the student appraisals. You'll need to send those over to Professor Erelthi regularly, but the two of you can discuss how often those need to be done." Ganya watched as Lamana's eyes flickered ever so slightly over at Miver, and felt an inner glow of satisfaction. "That's right. If you want to hide as a professor, then you have to do the work, and a witness means not forcing your work on the others." Student appraisals. All right, but what is the student show?" "Ah, well, that's the night just before we break for the first Emperor's birthday. The student council and the campus groups host the student show, followed by a formal party with the full orchestra. Most of the parents attend and pick up their girls for the break, so it's an important event." Ganya let that sink in for a moment. "Since you work with both the choir and the orchestra, you'll want to meet with the student council and see what they want to arrange. It's their production, so you're only there to help them along." "So, it's a concert night?" Duvari asked uncertainly. "The concert is always the central piece, and the other student clubs try and pitch in to make it something, but every year is much the same, except unless the performance is down by the beach or on the green, what music gets performed, what they wear, That sort of thing. Every class tries to do something different, of course, but it's nothing very dramatic. What matters is they take a great deal of pride in it. Graduation festivities are always a set piece, so the holiday shows are a chance for the girls to do something less formal. It sounds like fun. Davari smiled, as if the sun had come out on a rainy day. I'm glad you're looking forward to it. If you go talk to Pelly at the desk, she can give you the names of the students on the council. Ganya settled back, nodding toward the door magnanimously. That's all I wanted to see you about, really, so don't let me keep you. I know you'll do a wonderful job. Mevere watched Lamarna depart the office, before slowly looking back to Ganya. Well, she seems perky. Yes, she certainly does seem that way. Ganya's smile was as serene and inconspicuous as a cobra on a dinner table. But Ganya, that was evil. You know all the professors practically loathe anything to do with those shows. It's like herding wild Turogs all term long. And the test weeks before the break make it worse because it's twice the work. Maybe. Anyway, I hope you'll think back on this one day when you're sitting on my side of the desk. Trust me, there are days when the simple joys mean so much. Ganya looked at the closed office door fondly, before moving back to join Mevere. Now, tell me how Professor Warwick did on his first day. Tom had spent a lot of time picking over his failure to engage with the girls. The class had asked Mevere plenty of questions, but aside from a few hungry glances thrown his way, he might as well have been invisible. As he sorted out his frustration at feeling sidelined, he started picking over the problem and looking for solutions. 2 days later, he was humming to himself as he walked to class with Mevere. Well, you seem happy this morning. Mevere always stayed a few feet away for the look of propriety. So, what's that tune? And just what has you so pleased with yourself, Professor? Oh, it's a song called Keep Talking by Pink Floyd. Anyway, it started playing while I was moping around and hoping someone would come by for the chess club. I remember them. You have a lot of their music. Floyd is one of my favourites, Tom nodded, then huffed as he thought about the class. Anyway, the lyrics reminded me of what I learned back in officers' training about the 3 requirements for successful communication. Mevere dipped her head slightly and gave him a long look. I'm a teacher, but I can tell from the look on your face this is a human thing, so pretend I don't understand and tell me what you're getting at. Right. So, I was taught that successful communication has to be clearly composed, clearly sent, and clearly received. I know it's not my Vatican. I was already studying High Shill as a hobby, and our time together got me fluent, so I know I wasn't speaking gibberish, he said, ticking each point off on his fingers. If I had any doubts, they all asked you bright questions about some of the things I taught, so I know they were taking it in. Tom waited off to the side as Mevere pulled open the heavy door to the hall. That leaves how it was sent, the back and forth. So, you think they didn't talk to you because they didn't know how? Look, I get why Shilvanti teach the way you do. Your students come out with fantastic knowledge retention and recall. They're brilliant at learning directly from a book. Tom looked a bit pensive as he thought about it. It's perfect for teaching soldiers to follow a manual, which is exactly what the Imperium values. Anyway, the problem is that the way you teach just doesn't develop the skills for analysis. I gave them the information and I was hoping they'd pick at it, and they just took it at face value, he said, frowning in exasperation. I don't know if I'm right, but it has to be worth a try. As the class kicked off, Mevere's topics covered the first steps of Shill's industrial age and its expansion across the planet. When Tom's turn arrived, He launched into a comparison that covered Earth's early industrial age across Europe and North America. Mavert still had another day for covering the subject, so he took his time as he worked his way through presenting the material. He'd hoped things would improve after the novelty wore off. Unfortunately, Tom could see they were paying attention, but the lack of engagement was suffocating. Okay, the mountain isn't coming to me, so I have to go to the mountain. The room was still damned hot, but at least he was past imagining himself under a hairdryer. Moving over to his desk, he took a sip of water and paused. All right, I have an idea. I'm here to teach you human history and culture, so why don't I do that? Thunderous silence. Not trusting himself to look over to Mavert for help, he looked down at his spreadsheet. Without looking up, he picked out the names of the twins. Miss Caslin, he said, slowly studying the list for appearances. Both wore their white hair down, draped over their shoulders, in a fashion that framed their faces. Yes, Professor? One of the girls piped up, looking nervous at being called out. Caslin was the one on the left, then. Caslin, you must occasionally visit the shops about campus. Tell me, what was the last thing you purchased? Professor? Caslin's smile began to falter into nervous uncertainty. The last thing you purchased at a shop. What was it, please? It was a school shirt for outside classes. Kamara and I both got one to wear to the diving practices. Tom nodded at that, reminding himself he really needed to drop by and watch the diving team when they started practice. And you paid credits for the shirt? Caslin nodded a bit, still looking frozen to the spot. Very good. So, you had a contract with the store. You provided them with credits, an agreed medium of exchange for goods or services, and they provided you with the shirt. Well, yes, Yes? Yes, he nodded. Now, I am in a contract with you, Caslin. I'm here to teach you about humanity. That is my service. You're here to obtain that service, and the medium of exchange is you asking questions. We discuss the subject, and I guide your learning. Are you following me so far, Caslin? Yes, that is, I think so, Professor. Thank you, Caslin. Kamara? Kamara had been watching her sister, as if she was afraid for her life, and her head snapped back as Tom called her name. Yes, Professor? Tom paused as he looked at the pair. They even sound the same when they answer. Leaning back against the desk and gathering his thoughts, he nodded at the twin on the right. Kamara, we have a contract. Let's talk about history. I've just spent the last 10 minutes outlining and comparing the reconstruction and development on the North American continent from 1865 to 1877, to what Professor Pellevin was discussing. 12 years of vibrant development that opened a continent. Some historians have devoted entire careers to those 12 years. Leaning back on the desk, Tom propped his arms behind him and looked back at Kamara. You and I have it for 2 weeks, but let's set that aside, because I think we need some context. O'Reilly Tejo's book is part of the supplement reading that's been posted. Have you started to read it? Kamara shook her head in the negative and looked uncertain, but Tom held up his hand. That's fine, Kamara. We aren't to it yet. So, who has started reading the book? 2 nervous hands arose after a moment, and Tom picked the girl listed as an honor student. Deshin, what was the prime cause for the occupation of Earth? Deshin was a pretty girl, with long dark locks hanging down just above her shoulders. She looked down at her omnipad for a moment to collect her thoughts. The prime cause was the liberation and uplift of humanity as a part of the Imperium. That's straight out of the book, isn't it, Deshin? Yes, Professor. And can we go completely by Tejo's book, Deshin? Tom raised his eyebrows and waited expectantly. Deshin was smartly turned out, and she'd been paying close attention in both classes, so he had hopes of the girl, but there was panic on her face like she was stepping out on thin ice. I know this is different from what you're used to. Think it through. I think so, Professor? You've just given Tejo's answer, but is it the answer? Tejo's book is in its 2nd edition. I checked, so it's not entirely agreeing with its 1st edition. There are books on Earth that will give you completely different answers, and some of those are in their 5th edition in only 12 years. My world is a part of the Imperium now, so we are a part of you, and you are a part of us. But if the books don't agree, and the answers don't agree, then you need to start thinking and asking questions if you want to get at the truth. But, Professor, is the answer in the book? Deshin looked like she was struggling to comprehend the idea. Tom started to walk. Certainly it's one answer. It's the Admiral's answer. It's a very patriotic and simple answer. The Imperium felt sorry for the poor people of Earth, and felt there was a moral obligation to help. Pausing, he looked back at one of the off-world students. Priscilla, I believe you're from one of the worlds that border the Alliance. Is that the only reason for the Imperium to come to Earth? The girl had been listening and leaned forward, smiling. Well, no. My mother told me we're always exploring the interior of the Empire. We have to constantly secure our borders with the Alliance and the Consortium. All right. So the Imperium came to Earth, and a lot of the great houses followed. Are they there to take care of humanity? Belda? Belda opened her mouth a moment, but thought it over. The houses move in to create modern industry, and give humans work in modern jobs. Really? Do they pay the same they would a Shilvanti? Why does it still take most humans the best part of a year's salary to afford one of those omnipads that you have in your hands? Is that true? Blurted one of the girls. Jaxme? Tom looked up from his sheet long enough to see her nod. She was a tall girl and lean, with short cropped silver hair, and wore what looked like an honest-to-goodness silk scarf in blue and white. You don't have to take it from me. You can look it up for yourself. That's the point. So now we have answers about morality, competitive development against the other galactic powers, economics. What else? The girl next to Deshin rose a hand slowly, and Tom nodded. He looked down at the sheet for her name, and inside he felt like cheering. It was the first response he hadn't had to force out of them. Yes, Melondi? Well, the Empire needs to develop its territories, she said hesitantly. There are lots of primitive worlds, and all the governments are hoping to find a new industrial world like Earth. Tom nodded, thoughtfully. Very good. So now we have morality, development, economics, competition for growth. And I haven't even started talking about what humans think about the whole thing. Life is complicated, and you can't get your answers like they're out of a maintenance book. Opinions will differ and change, so you have to dig for the truth. Once you gather the facts, you can decide for yourselves. Are you saying humans always do that, Professor? Disala. Tom set the sheet aside. I wish I could say we're always true and honest about chopping down every cherry tree. Never mind, long story. But that's not the case. Tom thought about how to provide a better explanation for a moment. About 100 years before our Industrial Revolution, my nation was created by rebelling against its empire. It was sort of like the Wars of Refusal. Now, at the time of this incident I'll tell you about, the outcome of the war was very much in doubt, and my country needed to rally people's spirits. They got their opportunity when one of our commanders had a victory, taking over a place called Fort Ticonderoga. I don't understand. Wasn't it a victory? Yes, it was, Desala. but it wasn't the victory that counted so much as what the commander supposedly said. What did she say? Tom looked at the girl, and was gratified to recognize her from the photograph. Her name was Letzi, and she wore a dark blue ribbon threaded through a braid in her hair. It's what he said, Letzi. The commander was a man named Ethan Allen, and according to history, when Allen took over the fort, the enemy commander was hiding in his offices. Now, according to the story, Allen struck a pose and said, "In the name of God and the Continental Congress, come out." Rather like he was saying, "By the name of Goddess and the Empress, come out." That got approving nods from all the girls and a few smiles. One or two took on a dreamy look, imagining some shirtless human warrior straight out of the videos. Allen was a rough, backcountry woodsman, and what he actually said was, "Come out of that goddamn hole, you goddamn rat, or I'll kill every man, woman, and child in this goddamn fort." Approving nods turned to disbelieving stares, and Tom spread his hands, making no apology. That was the truth. But it wasn't the truth that the leaders needed. And that's my point. You have to pay attention to the truth, because if you don't, people will change the truth for what they want, or for what they need it to be. You do that long enough, and no matter how good you think your reasons are, it's just like building a fortress on a foundation of sand. Sooner or later, it all just turns into a circus. Jacksme raised her hand again. What's a circus? Tom paused and realised he'd lapsed into English before answering. Naturally, the Shorvanti wouldn't have pre-video entertainment. You remember I explained how large-scale transportation was still being developed? Before humans had video and even radio systems, entertainers would earn a living going between towns in groups, performing music, showing off different acts, and entertaining the crowds. They called those groups a circus. Do humans still do those? Asked Zephyr. Tom looked over at the girl. She was athletic enough to have stood in for some of the Marines he'd met, and was looking at him with open curiosity. Well, they slowly fell out of use as video entertainment became widespread, but we do still have one called the Circus of the Sun, he said with a smile. They don't go around in steam-driven trains or wagons, but they certainly put on a show. One of the twins, Kamara, raised her hand. A show? Could we watch it? Tom thought about it for a moment and nodded. I don't see why not. The performers don't speak in most of their shows, so it's not like there's a language problem. I have recordings of most of their performances, though I think you do better with the two that tell a story, to help it make sense. Tell you what, I'll download them off my pad at home, and anyone that wants can get a copy from me at the end of our next class. What are they about? How do they tell a story without language? Asked Melondi, raising her hand slightly. Well, there are two shows. One is called Ka, and it's about two empires at war. It has a beautiful princess on one side and a handsome prince on the other. Tom smiled as he watched the girls all staring at that. The other is called Allegria, and I suppose it's about a young woman your age, as she finds love and grows up. Tom knew it wasn't classwork, but the girls were actively talking to him instead of going around him, and he felt elated to finally make a connection. Tom looked over at Mever and smiled. They tell the stories through the music. Mever walked out of the hall next to Tom, still not quite understanding what she'd seen. I still don't know how you did that. It's like you were just talking to them. I was. I know it got a little off topic for a bit, but I finally connected with them. And before class was over, they really understood what I was saying about connections between early communications and industrialization. He grinned as they crossed over the green, taking the short way back towards the dorms. That's the thing about Socratic teaching. It's more than pulling the answer from the book. It provides an understanding about why it's the right answer. Mavere shook her head. And that really works for humans. It seems like loose thinking. Not all humans. Tom braced himself as they left the hall, and the heat and humidity of midday washed over him. Do you want to go over to the Commons and get something for lunch? I could go for a bite to eat before I head out to the biology classroom, and I probably need at least another bottle of water. It's not a bad walk, but it's like a sauna outside. Miv smiled at that. She still chafed at having to keep their relationship quiet, but lunch together wouldn't appear unprofessional. That sounds nice, and maybe you'll have students come by today. I don't know, he shrugged. I'm not going to get my hopes up. It was a pretty small entry on the extracurriculars list, and I couldn't explain it very well with the space in the ad. I hoped some students would come and check it out, but I guess not. You got some takers for beach running, though, right? There are always a few who like it. You should come along sometime. It's good exercise. Maybe once the weather cools down. Are you sure you have to go out to the biology building if no one shows up? It's one of the farthest classrooms on campus. If no one comes in a few weeks, you could ask Ganya for something nearer. I should probably keep going out since it was on the listing. Anyway, it's not bad. I really like the woods around campus, and in another few weeks it shouldn't be so hot for the walk. Mavere looked around them as they crossed the green. No one was particularly close, and she sighed. That's not exactly what I was thinking. I know you're going to say I'm being overprotective, but I am a little concerned about you walking out in the woods by yourself. The whole area is completely out of sight from the Commons. Tom grumbled a bit, and made a face before conceding. I have a can of Grimshaw spray. I don't think I'm liable to get into any trouble, but I promise to have it ready whenever I go out there. But if no one comes for the club, promise me you'll think about asking for something closer. All right, I'll think about it, he said, before mulling it over. It's really very pretty, though, and not like any kind of forest on Earth. I figure I can spend the time grading reports, reading a bit, listening to music. I won't die of boredom. He looked up and caught Miv's eye. Or anything else. Captain Sellar tossed her omnipad back on the table and slouched down in her chair. Sweet goddess's tits, that woman is in a bad mood today. Sergeant Jellick made a face but kept watching the video feed. I'm guessing she didn't take it very well. You mean ever since we discovered there's a reporter from Capital News sitting on top of the objective, at least 3 times a week? Sellar scowled and hunched down lower as she studied the screens. If she were any hotter, you could probably pick out a thermal bloom on the infrared. Jellick pulled at the lock of her hair. She dyed it cobalt blue and tended to tug on it when she was nervous. She has orders then? You were texting for a while. Oh, yes. When you finish setting all the cans for tracking, call Rolan in and tell her to get a hold of Central. We need them to run down what this Kellark Gulten is up to. Jellick looked back apprehensively. She liked Sellar, and the woman didn't look happy. Captain, that's going to take days. Don't I know it? Sellar rubbed her forehead a moment. Central Intel is going to query Capital News. If we're lucky, it will take 2 or 3 days to get a response back to Central, then for Central to get it to us. If we're really lucky, they'll scrub the response down to just this Gulten girl, before they send it back. 3 days? That seems like a long time. To run down what hundreds of their reporters out in the field are up to, find out the latest story they're working on, then answer the request? We'll be lucky if it's that quick. Central won't ask Capital News about just this one particular reporter. They don't want to give anything away about which reporter we're interested in or why. All the news feeds are discreet when it comes to a request from the interior, but you never know. Central isn't going to risk churning up the water. That makes sense. Jellick nodded and pulled out her omnipad. I'll get Rolan back here. She's really reading the textbooks and following that class? Well, today was only the second class, but you watched. It was pretty good. About half the girls on the pods are watching the playback, and I may borrow the text files myself. Joke shrugged, as she texted Valan. She's tearing through it with a vengeance, but it's not like there's a lot to do down in this bunker besides hit the gym and watch vids. I know, but at least it's a big bunker, so it's no worse than shipboard duty. Sure, I'll have to get out and really walk around in the fresh air with the recon pods, but we're comfortable, and we aren't emptying trash bins or making sure the cleaning bots are getting the room corners. That's true. I suppose treating it like a shipside tour is a good way to look at it, and the air isn't so stale since Kalani changed the filters. Jelk set down the pad after sending the text, and ran another threat assessment since the objective was on the move. What did you think about that part where the human commanders were making up stories? Talang clasped her hands together and stretched up fully, cracking her knuckles. Sergeant Jelk, you don't really think we were given the whole story about why we're stuck in this bunker in our mission briefing, do you?